Hi, everyone. Welcome to our teach-in on energy affordability. It's great to see you all. We'll get started in another minute. We have some amazing speakers today. We're going to kick it off with Laurie Wheelock, the Executive Director of PULP, who many of you may know. PULP's incredible work advocating for utility customers across the state. Laurie is really an expert on these issues and is going to be presenting on what their priorities are, more immediate priorities related to the budget and just sort of the big picture issues that New Yorkers are facing when it comes to energy affordability. Then we're going to hear from Annie Carforo from We Act for Environmental Justice, and Allison Considine from the Building Decarbonization Coalition. Allison and Annie are going to be in the kind of second part of the teach-in. In the first part, we'll hear from Laurie, get some questions for Laurie, then she's going to have to drop off, and then we're going to hear the latest from Allison and Annie, really getting into the weeds on how transitioning the gas system is ultimately going to help us make our energy bills more affordable for all New Yorkers. And so we've got some really substantive and exciting information to share with you today. It's very timely with the One House budgets that just came out yesterday. And I know that we have a lot of great advocates from across the state who've joined us to learn the latest and take action so that we can ensure that there are more affordability provisions in the budget that also help us transition off of fossil fuels as quickly as possible, as equitably as possible. So if you could just, introduce yourself in the chat. Would love to know who's here. We so appreciate everyone for joining today and for just, being a part of this network of people who care about our clean energy transition and are very much working in their communities and at the state level to change policy and implement programs. So thanks to all of you for what you do and for being here. This is definitely a dicey moment, to say the least, in our state, in our country, in our world. I'm sure I don't need to harp on that. It's sort of a black cloud in many ways, the Trumpocalypse that is seeing such horrible rollbacks and pretty much everything good and that we care about, particularly as it relates to clean energy and equity. But we forge ahead and we do what we can. And I know that we can be victorious here in New York State, despite what's happening at the federal level. There's a lot of progress that we can make. And so that's why we actually hosted this same series of presenters a couple of weeks ago for legislators and legislative staffers so that they could get kind of the inside scoop from leading advocates on what they can prioritize or what they should prioritize in the budget to improve New Yorkers' ability to pay their bills, to reduce energy burdens, to really provide more expanded energy affordability programs, and to help accelerate our transition off of fossil fuels at the same time, because we know that those things are not mutually exclusive and they really do go hand in hand. We can act on climate, we can implement clean energy solutions, and we can also reduce our reliance on the volatile fossil fuel market and stop dumping, right, good money after bad into this antiquated polluting system that is poisoning our air and really killing our planet. So I know we all know that. That's why we're here. The legislators that attended the teach-in that we did a couple of weeks ago and their staff were really interested. And I think hopefully some of the positive things that did end up in their One House budgets, hopefully, hearing from these great advocates had an influence, and hearing, of course, from all of you as we continue to build this movement for clean energy and energy affordability. But we decided to reprise this, to invite our speakers back so that all of you in our extended network could benefit from their expertise and knowing how important these issues are and how much we want to continue to push ahead and make progress in the budget negotiations and, of course, this legislative session and beyond. So thank you all again for being here. Afterwards, we'll circulate the recording and the PowerPoints, and also typically we capture people's questions because they're often so good. And if we can't answer them right on the spot, we make sure to get our speakers' input, and then we collect those answers and circulate them later. So please don't be shy. Share your questions. We want to hear from you. And again, we're going to begin with Laurie Wheelock, the Executive Director of the Public Utility Law Project, PULP. And we're going to then take questions for Laurie initially, and then Laurie is going to have to drop off, and then we'll hear from our other wonderful speakers, Allison Considine and Annie Carforo, and then what you can do, what we can all do to help make these energy affordability policies and programs a reality. So thank you all again for being here, for our speakers, for taking the time. Really excited for this discussion, and I will turn it over to Laurie.
Thank you so much, Betta. Good afternoon, everyone. Big thanks to New Yorkers for Clean Power, We Act for Environmental Justice, Building Decarbonization Coalition. It's so nice to be here with you all again, but this time for the public. As Betta mentioned, my name is Laurie Wheelock. I go by she, hers pronouns, and I am the Executive Director and Counsel of the Public Utility Law Project. And so I'm going to start today's presentation. We do have slides, and again, as Betta mentioned, the recording will be going out to everyone. Our slides will be shared with everyone. And I'm going to start with just some level setting. You know, what is PULP? What is our kind of purpose in the energy affordability realm? And then dive into a topic that's really important. It can be heavy, and that is rate design and how our bills are actually structured right now and what the public is paying for when you get that utility bill. So we can advance now to PULP slides when you're ready. And so PULP, again, is a 40-year-old nonprofit. And if we can go to the next slide, thank you so much. Our organization assists with all the utilities. And so we like to describe utility as all those services that go into making your home safe. That's the electric, the natural gas, the water, internet, cable, phone. All those services fall under our PULP umbrella. And we represent low-income New Yorkers in multiple ways. We intervene in rate cases. So when Con Edison wants to increase delivery rates, we actually become a party. We also do policy work, and we also, though, do direct services. And I always feel that the work we do on a daily basis to help low-income utility customers navigate their issues and concerns is our most important work. And we're hearing a lot of anxiety right now. Our demographic since January 21st has been through so much, be it fears that SNAP food benefits are going to be cut. What will the tariffs mean for all of us trying to pay our electric bills, and then see changes so quickly in the press, to the rate cases, to the winter bills. And so again, we're excited to be here with you today. Going to the next slide. So again, we're going to start with how utility customers are charged now when it comes to your electric and gas bills. And so there's two kind of worlds on every electric and gas bill in New York. Pull up your NYSEG bill, pull up your Central Hudson or your Con Edison bill, and you're going to see two universes. There's supply charges and delivery charges. Supply charges are unregulated. The utility company does not make a profit. It's just the cost to actually get that electric and get gas and then purchase it from the market, and they pass it along to the consumer. So because it's unregulated, it's not fixed, and essentially can be volatile. People may remember back in 2022, we were coming out of the pandemic. There was low supply, high demand. There was, the invasion of Ukraine, different geopolitical factors at play that made supply bills that winter really, really high. And so wanted to share that side of the bill is it can be very volatile. This winter, the supply charges typically in our review have been a little lower than last winter, but we've also had a polar vortex. And so we're seeing really kind of higher bills on that delivery side of the bill, which we're coming into next. So the delivery side of the bill, that is the rate case. Con Edison, NYSEG, Central Hudson, they cannot just change your delivery rate without going through an administrative rate process. Those delivery charges are regulated. And so Con Ed, for instance, had to file a rate case with the Department of Public Service and the New York State Public Service Commission to start down that pathway of seeking an increase on those delivery sides of the bill. And so what are those charges? It's everything from the infrastructure, maintaining that infrastructure, the meters, the poles, the customer service, even the accounting and billing department. All of that side of the bill goes through the delivery charges. And so really important to kind of know the difference between the two. Now going to the next slide, we're going to take a look at a sample bill. So this is a Con Edison sample bill, and it's broken down on the left side with what you're being charged. And it's good to always check, okay, what was I charged last month? What are my new charges? On the right side, they do have this really helpful daily kind of comparison of how your usage is in comparison with last year at this time and this year at this time. And Con Edison, if we move forward with the slides, you'll be able to see some really interesting charges on this portion of the bill. Again, always checking to see how many days you're being charged. And this point here is really helpful because Con Edison has a messages for you section on their bill. We always tell the public to read this. They typically give a heads up, okay, supply prices may increase in the next couple of months, or there's new affordability programs coming, or there might be new energy efficiency programs coming. So we always like to highlight that for customers, that this is a really good thing to look for on your Con Edison bill. If you move to the second page, this is where we get into that whole breakdown of the delivery and the supply charges here in New York. Again, today we're using a Con Ed sample bill, but the utilities across the state have similar kind of breakdowns, similar information on each company's bill, but again, kind of laid out differently. So we're going to proceed with this as the sample. So Con Edison has their electric portion at the top and then their gas breakdown right underneath it. And then they divide those two worlds of charges this way. So the supply side is on the left and the delivery side is on the right. You probably remember me saying that supply side is volatile. And so that is really good to check on a monthly basis. And just again, be kind of cognizant that that can fluctuate depending on what's happening, even in the world. The delivery side, again, is the rate cases, the heart of the rate cases and what customers are ultimately charged. And if we advance the slide one more time, something else that we like to flag for individuals is that it's really important on a monthly basis to check to make sure that you're getting charged for actual usage. Sometimes there could be issues. There could be a problem with your meter. There could be some sort of issue with the utility reading that meter. And so sometimes customers get estimated bills. This can be a significant problem. We had issues in the Central Hudson territory and also the NYSEG territory in the last couple of years where customers were getting routinely estimated meter readings. Under the public service law and even just, it makes business sense, right? If you are getting charged for something, it better be for what you actually used. And so you always want to check that and make sure that you are being charged for an actual meter reading. Now, diving deeper and advancing the slide one more time, maybe one more time. There we go. So something that's very important to know while we're talking about energy affordability and how we set rates in New York is on the delivery side of the bill, everyone has a basic service charge, and you're going to have it for each account you have. So this sample bill, you have an electric side and you have a gas side. And so the basic service charge here in New York is essentially a portion of those delivery costs. So again, it could be the meters, it could be the customer service that comes out to read the meters, but it is essentially an amount that will show up on your bill no matter how much you use. And so this is something that really, we at PULP feel is regressive. It's almost like going up to the gas pump and them telling you, sorry, Laurie, you can't pump your gas until you pay us $20. And so Again, we have concerns about this as a component, and you'll notice it's both on the electric and the gas side. So even if you go out and you maybe have a loved one in the hospital and they haven't been home for a month, this individual's bill is almost $50 before they even use any electric and gas. Now, underneath the basic service charge, that's where you're going to see that delivery charge. That again is the rate that is set in the rate case, and it does go on by usage. And so you want to check that and kind of monitor it. In New York State, when we have the Public Service Commission approve the rate plans after the utilities go through rate increases, it's very common that they get a multi-year deal. And so for Con Edison customers, every January for 3 years, typically, this delivery rate goes up, as does the basic service charge. And so flagging that for discussion purposes, we think is really important. Again, looking at the system, looking at affordability here in New York, understanding the way the system works now. We routinely have people call us and they say, I don't understand, Laurie. I kept the thermostat at the same temperature. I didn't do anything different. But what is going on? Often it's because the delivery rate has gone up in the last year. And then unfortunately, again, this winter with the polar vortex, we're seeing more usage. So now we can advance to the next slide. I'm not going to go through each of these, but I thought it was really important for today's discussion to also flag the different way these bills look across the state. Again, it's the same information, but laid out very differently. And some, honestly, I think utility companies' bills are easier to read than others. And so knowing we have a broad demographic of advocates and individuals from across the state, we're always happy to, come in and talk about how these bills look and how to read them service territory to service territory. And so moving to the next slide. The utilities have to file monthly reports here in New York, and it helps us track how customers are doing. And again, in PULP's, review of customer bills, we're seeing the delivery side going up, we're seeing usage go up. That supply side, again, not regulated, but also often a factor for unaffordability. And so as of December of 2024, these are the reports on how each of the investor-owned utilities customers are doing, and they're not doing well. Over 1.3 million residential accounts were behind on their bills by over $1.85 billion. This is about as high as we were kind of towards the tail end of the pandemic and before the state provided bill relief to help with COVID. And so we're really worried about this. This is showing us that customers are falling behind, they're having a hard time paying their bills, and again, could even be at risk for service termination. And so going to the next slide. These really quickly are samples of what customers are getting in real life right now. Again, before the pandemic, we often saw customers coming in to PULP for help whose bills were falling behind by about $900. This individual owes over $6,000, and that's becoming the norm that we're seeing. We're seeing between $4,000 and $6,000 when people come into us. And so moving to the next slide. This is also something that is really, really hard for New Yorkers. And not only are the balances high, but the utilities are allowed to charge late fees. This individual came to us, they're a Queens resident, and in 1 month, they accrued $46 in late fees because they owed this much on their bill. And so again, just wanted to show some real life examples of what people are going through right now. Going to the next slide. Why are we worried about the arrears? Well, again, the arrears, which is a horrible term, but it just means how far behind people are by 60 days or more, is a sign of whether or not they can afford their bills. And we, again, are really worried that seeing how high the arrears are come the end of heating season on April 16th, this could mean widespread terminations across the state. There's also economic factors that need to be considered because all ratepayers could be affected someday down the road. Now, the utilities have a way that if someone falls behind on their account, they owe a debt, it gets shut off, or they close that account. If, for instance, after 120 days, they can't collect on that debt, it can go into something called uncollectibles. And uncollectibles essentially are old arrears, that they can then seek to spread across the entire rate base. And so we see this. We see the utilities often seek to recover old arrears that have been from attached to closed accounts and spread it amongst all ratepayers. In the current Central Hudson rate case, one of the economic drivers is about 30% of the entire ask they're seeking from ratepayers has to do with uncollectibles in their district, in their service territory. So again, there is a tie between arrears potentially becoming uncollectibles and then all ratepayers paying that debt. In our world, though, the Energy Affordability Program is a proven way to help low-income people pay their bills. New York State already has a goal to try and help low-income customers afford their bills with a 6% factor. The goal is that their utility bill not cost more than 6% of their total income. And we see low-income people get into this affordability program. They get monthly discounts off their bill for a year, and they often do better. They fall behind less. They, are not at risk of shut off. And so we routinely try to help people get in this program. We find it to be a lifeline. And so flagging, again, we have programs that have been tremendously successful. And if anything, now is the time to learn, embrace, strengthen, and then figure out how we can help more New Yorkers. And so moving to the next slide. How can we lower utility bills? I know we're going to talk about a lot of this later with our fellow advocates, but immediate financial relief, grants, bill credits, energy efficiency, lowering those bills so they're being charged less. But then the harder part, this is the harder part, is changing the business as usual, looking to reform rate structures, finding ways to cut those costs. And there's a whole laundry list, and I know we'll be talking more about this later this afternoon. But this is a very important aspect, but honestly, some of the harder questions to answer. And so moving forward, PULP pushed for specific provisions in the budget process to try and help with energy affordability. And so really high level wanted to flag, we asked that $200 million go to that energy affordability program I just talked about. Again, that is a program that provides bill credits every single month for a year to help low income households afford their bills. We also sought $100 million to expand that program to try to go from low income up into moderate income households to help them. And then we also asked for $150 million to create a heat cooling benefit, essentially to have a cash assistance program to help people afford their summer bills. On a regular basis during, honestly, even now, starting now, we have New Yorkers call us from across the state who are terrified of what the summer means for their electric bill. They're scared to turn on the AC unit. They're scared that they're going to get shut off and not be able to turn it back on. And so having a program ready to go to help people afford their bills over the summer is something we're really advocating for. And so that was another one of the provisions that PULP sought. Moving on to the next slide, I think that does end my presentation. So again, thank you so much for having PULP here today to try to do some level setting on what and how we're being charged as utility ratepayers right now, some of the things that we see that have been helpful, but also highlighting some of the difficult, the harder pieces that we have to do as a state to help in the long term make energy affordable for all. Happy to do questions and answers, and apologies that I do have to drop at 1 o'clock. I'm so sorry to have to do that today.
Well, Laurie, we so appreciate you being here, and that was a fantastic presentation. Second time I saw it, but I learned just as much because it is so dense with content. And I wish it wasn't so hard to navigate utility bills. I wish they were easier to, for customer service issues. And, you didn't need to be handheld to understand the bills. But it's really is very challenging. So thank you for breaking that down and, just for all of your incredible advocacy. I see we do have a question from Piper. And she says it may be an obvious question, but again, it's not necessarily an obvious question.
Exactly.
It's also hard, right?
Yes.
It said if it's an estimated charge, will it say estimated under reading type instead of actual?
Yes, and it looks like Samantha got to this as well. And so it sounds like you might be a nice at customer. And again, they're all a little different, right? But yeah, typically you'll see an E or an A, and you want that A, believe me, that's what you're going to look for.
Okay, great. We have another question. Are companies' uncollectibles discounted a percentage before they are billed across all ratepayers?
So, Tom, that is an excellent question, and it really depends on so many factors. There's a whole process typically that goes into place, and it can either happen in the context of a rate case where it is a kind of bucket that is brought to the table and talked about and planned, or the utility can even petition separately and do like an administrative ask. And so each of them are done a little differently. Sometimes it's a big chunk, sometimes it's a portion of a chunk, but they at least can have those conversations to figure out, okay, of this large amount, how are we going to spread it out? Over how many years are we going to spread it out? And so, unfortunately, there's not necessarily like a cut and dry, but there is at least a process in place that can lead to, a more equitable spreading out of the uncollectibles.
Thank you, Lori. From Haley, do you have any tips or tricks for people who see something fishy on their bill when they engage customer service?
Absolutely. So, Haley, what we recommend is go to that utility first, ask those questions, talk to them. If after speaking with them, you are still concerned, and we say this, there's a lot of jargon, there's a lot of acronyms, it can be hard, but honestly, go with your gut. And if you feel something is still wrong and you could not get a satisfactory answer or resolution, there is the Department of Public Service here in New York. They are the regulator. And they have a process where you can go and you can file inquiries, you can file complaints against your utility. And so that is a way to kind of go through a process to try and get a resolution if you have those concerns. And we can drop that information in the chat for you in a minute.
Thank you, Lori. You are so knowledgeable about all of this. That's really amazing. Okay, so no pressure, but Bob wants to know, is there a website where I could put a zip code or a county name and find out what the current rate of customers in that location needing energy affordability assistance? Is it 10% of residents in that location, 20%, 30%, etc.?
Yeah. So, Bob, I don't know if there's one perfect website that does that. And I know we have a lot of advocates on today. But the way that PULP looks into kind of identifying energy burden is we use different, community data I'll flag it on the federal level, as well as then by census tract. Um, as of a couple of weeks ago, we were having a hard time accessing some of that federal data. So flagging that has been a concern. It seems to be back up and running. And I know we look at Alice reports and other factors, but we file our testimony in each rate case and do like a energy burden analysis. And so if you go to the department's website and look at the rate cases, you can find our testimony and pull up at least what we've done in that realm.
Thanks, Lori. Kind of a related question, but how do they determine what 6% of a family's income is?
So the way New York State does that now is we do not go household by household. Every year, the utilities have an algorithm and they run that to determine what that credit will look like. So it's not household by household, but there is at least a system in place where it's almost like the average customer.
From Chris, would it be possible to have a progressive rate structure that charges residential customers who use more energy, perhaps over a certain threshold or allowance, a higher rate? Are there any examples of this being done?
Yes. And so, Chris, we actually make that argument in some of our rate cases when it comes to the gas side and actually say, maybe we should look at having some sort of rate structure where the more you use, the more you pay, things of that nature. And so we do think, the rate design component of this process could be very helpful in having broader discussions when it comes to energy affordability.
And related also is Ellen's question about how we can lower these costs for everyone. She said, I recently ran for office. You go, Ellen. And people in Long Island are getting strangled with these bills. And of course, we are going to, get into this a little deeper, with all of the investments that are currently going into the gas system that we want to shift very soon, we hope. But before, and then we're gonna transition after Laurie to Allison's presentation on that. But before we go there, I just wanted to give you the opportunity, Laurie, if you have any additional thoughts that you want to share about how we can lower bills when so many people are really feeling it, and especially now
Yeah.
with rate hikes across the state. What can we do about it?
Yeah, and Ellen, I'm trying to track in the chat, but you have a lot of really powerful comments and completely agree. And I think part of the problem right now is everything. Everything is a cost on ratepayers. And so stuff Pulp wants, right? Like we want that energy affordability program. But right now, other ratepayers are helping low income customers, but we're also paying for the poles, the meters, the infrastructure, we're paying for everything. And so it's going to be, again, kind of those three buckets. It's with the individual customers. Can we get some state budget support to help offset or at least help add people to existing programs? And then again, if we can get energy efficiency, help lower those bills so they're paying less for using less is important. And then there's that third, and that's the harder bucket. It's the cost. And literally what Pulp has been saying is we have to pick up things and look at it and say, can we do something here? That basic service charge, maybe we need to reform that. The way that we calculate the return on equity, the way that we, handle infrastructure. The Public Service Commission just opened up an investigation into how much, executive level management at these utilities are getting as far as benefits. Can there be ways to attack those costs and cut them? And so again, it's not necessarily easy, but it's the type of work and conversations we have to have. And Pulp is really excited to be here in this moment and help with that process. And we know our fellow advocates are trying to think about this as well as we continue to think about how we're going to be able to make all of the targets we need to.
Thanks, Lori. And I see also Jared Logan chimed in the chat about working for smarter energy services and about community solar. And that is, of course, another possible program if you can't install solar panels on your roof, if you're a renter or you have too many trees or whatever the reason, that everyone can sign up for community solar, and then you get about like a 10% discount. So that is something you can do in addition to, of course, all of the envelope measures and weatherization, energy efficiency steps to reduce energy use and ultimately save money. Any other questions on here? Oh, Tom had one more. Is recovery part of the arrears thing?
So Tom, and I'm sorry if maybe in the chat you want to add a little bit. I'm not really sure what we mean about the recovery, like what you mean by the recovery piece. One thing I wanted to flag for Judith is, making sure too that there are rate structures and rate classes for people with heat pumps as well, and making sure that they are okay when they get switched. We actually actively help Con Ed customers make sure that when they make that switch to a heat pump, that they get put into the special service class and get charged that rate, and they're not stuck in the regular rate too. So happy to stay and try to help answer questions in the chat. And again, just so excited to be here and having these conversations with you all.
Well, thank you, Lori. We're so excited to have you. It's so, so helpful. And we might end up doing a future teach-in where we really dig into that Con Ed heat pump rate pilot that is, it seems, very effective. I mean, not that many people have signed up for it yet. I'm glad you're helping people sign up for it, but we want to get more people into the program and see hopefully a similar program replicated across the state, to really, encourage electrification as much as possible through rate design. Let's see, we had a couple more questions, and then I think we'll change gears. Are there certain, from Sasha, are there certain areas of the city, for example, that have much lower or much higher rate charges? Um,
No, it should be, the same. It's more what your rate class is, what you're being charged. Essentially, I think Con Edison alone has like 12 to 15 different service classes. Some are industrial and whatnot, but it should be very similar. It can be tricky though, because it's a large service territory and they calculate their bills in 21 cycles. So your bill may look different than your neighbors, but the charges should be pretty similar. They may fluctuate a little bit.
Thanks, Lori. Okay, so I think we do need to wrap this up. I know we could talk to you all day. There's so much to learn. Thank you again for sharing your expertise, and we can definitely follow up with people with more details about the heat pump pilot, the Con Ed heat pump pilot, and other issues that people raised in the chat. So thank you so much for your great questions and this terrific discussion that's happening in the chat. So now we're going to move to Allison Considine, fantastic advocate for building electrification, working for the Building Decarbonization Coalition, and working furiously to get New York Heat over the finish line this session, and sharing the latest on the research and studies that are showing how if we do transition the gas system, we will ultimately have a more affordable system. Allison, thank you so much for being here and doing this again. I know how much everybody here is excited to hear about this, and of course, how we can keep pushing for New York Heat.
Thank you, Betta, and thank you so much to New Yorkers for Clean Power for putting this together, and for all of you spending the afternoon with us. It's always an honor to share the screen with Laurie from PULP, who is such a powerful advocate, and just really, really appreciate you opening us up with that discussion, Laurie. Like Betta said, my name is Allison Considine. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the senior campaign manager for the Building Decarbonization Coalition in New York. The BDC aligns critical stakeholders on the path to transform the nation's buildings through clean energy, and really looking at how we can eliminate fossil fuels in buildings to improve people's health, cut climate and air pollution, prioritize high road jobs, and ensure that our communities are more resilient to the impacts of climate change. So like Betta said, today I'm going to be discussing in particular how the New York Heat Act, which is a piece of legislation being sponsored by Senator Liz Krueger and Assemblymember Joanne Simon, how the New York Heat Act can enable affordable system electrification by upgrading whole neighborhoods to electrification together, leveraging funds that we would otherwise be spending on the aging gas system. I'm going to explain how the same financial tools that have allowed the gas system to grow and be sort of the main source of heating for a lot of people in New York State, tools like cost sharing and depreciation can be put to use to facilitate neighborhood scale building electrification upgrades if we can free up and redirect that money from gas pipe replacement. Next slide, please. So like Laurie said, I'm just going to start by kind of grounding us in how we pay for our current energy system. Similar sample bill to what she showed. My discussion is really going to be focused on the delivery charge side of things. So like she said, supply charges are a pass-through cost. It fluctuates with the price of fuel. What's really driving these significant rate increases on the gas side is more this delivery charge. And there's a lot that goes into it, but one of the major expenses within that delivery charge is the cost of expanding, maintaining, repairing the thousands of miles of gas mains and pipes that distribute gas throughout our state. So this is where we're going to be focusing today on how, if we can ramp down our spending on that side and redirect that spending into electrification, we can enable affordable system electrification. Next slide, please. So I want to highlight here just kind of going back to this concern, and it sounds like from the chat, people are seeing this. We're all experiencing this, but gas rates have been rising from across the state. The next couple of slides have some charts that show data pulled from the joint proposals of the 5 major utilities pulled together by the Alliance for a Green Economy. I would just note that the y-axis on these varies across each chart. We kind of zoomed in so you can really get a sense of the dramatic increases from 2023 to 2024 and 2024 to 2025 on people's gas bills. So I'm really kind of showing this, and we can kind of click through the next 2 slides as I speak, because the gas system is increasingly expensive. We have a very, very old gas system in New York State. Some pipes in the ground today are over 100 years old, and the cost of maintaining that system has been skyrocketing. Thank you. And yeah, so you might have seen your utility name through there. And so what we're talking about with New York Heat, with the sort of question of how do we structurally start to shift things, is phasing down that process of upgrading and maintaining old pipes and instead electrifying people who would be served by those pipes. So the way that utilities have historically kept that gas delivery charge low and historically paid for that massive gas system is through this formula of an expanding customer base, so adding on more and more customers to spread out those fixed infrastructure costs, and depreciation, so recovering the costs over a multi-decade time horizon. So even though utilities have been spending billions on the gas system, month-to-month costs have been kept relatively low through this historical model. Next slide, please. The problem is this formula, this model, only works as long as the gas system is continuing to expand and continuing to be useful for decades to come. As customers leave the gas system, the costs are being spread over fewer and fewer people. And so for the people who are on it, the costs are going to be going up. Next slide, please. So this is sort of what we're living through right now. Call it an unmanaged transition where some of you on the call might have opted to get a heat pump when your boiler died, or might be starting to electrify your home and leaving the gas system. Some folks aren't. Because this isn't being coordinated, the folks who are electrifying are leaving the gas system, and the folks remaining are seeing their bills rise because that cost is shared over fewer people now. This is an increasing problem because the gas pipes are being underutilized. Gas consumption by homes and businesses fell by about 13% from 2019 to 2024, and sales are likely to continue to decline as the climate warms and as consumers electrify. So I'm going to just zoom in a little bit on how much exactly the gas system costs us, and it's a lot. Replacing gas pipe costs approximately $6 million per mile. And 1 mile of gas pipe serves on average about 100 customers. So that works out to about $60,000 per customer. Now you're not getting that $60,000 all at once because it's cost shared and depreciated over time, but that's kind of the true cost of gas. Our friends and colleagues at Switchbox, which is a climate data and analysis think tank, put out a new analysis and found that the state's utilities are on track to replace 15% of the New York's aging gas pipelines by 2050 at an estimated cost of $34 to $65 billion. So we really are on track to just spend astronomical amounts of money for this repair and replacement. And what we're really arguing for is one of the ways we get at this problem in a structural way is turning away from that path and instead investing in electrification. Next slide, please. So like I said, we're in the midst of row 2 here, an unmanaged transition off pipeline gas. This is a big problem for costs. It's a big problem for equity. We're not kind of taking care to protect the customers who are stuck on the gas system from those skyrocketing rates. And it doesn't make sense with our climate law. So what we want to move towards is a managed and phased transition. Nothing about this is going to start, everyone all at once tomorrow. This is really a transition that we need to be planning for now so it can unfold over the decades to come. And if we're planning for it, we can really be protecting costs. We can be protecting customers, making sure there's a just transition for workers who work on the pipeline system, while also hitting our emissions reductions goals and ensuring a reliable and resilient and safe system. Next slide, please. So how the New York Heat Act fits into this is it would really enable smart utility planning. Where there's a gas pipe nearing the end of its useful life, where there's leak-prone pipe, the utilities could, instead of repairing or replacing that section of pipe to the tune of $6 million per mile, they could invest in neighborhood-scale electrification, things like thermal energy networks and home energy upgrades to electric appliances, to remove customers from the gas system together and have them upgrade to all electric. If they can plan that transition synced up to the sections of the gas system that are at the end of their life, and redirect that spending instead, customers can come out ahead in terms of the overall cost of the system and the overall amount of money that's going into our delivery charges. Next slide, please. And so you might be thinking, oh, doesn't it cost a lot of money to electrify a home? And that's not exactly the right question here, because we're talking about electrifying whole neighborhoods together. So we're using the same tools, cost sharing across the whole rate base, depreciating the cost of these expenses over time, so that when you are in a building that's along a section of gas pipe where they're looking at a neighborhood gas transition project and actually upgrading everyone, you're not paying for that new heat pump out of pocket. The utility is providing that equipment to facilitate the retirement of that gas pipeline. Next section, please. So what we're really trying to do is avoid paying for this unmanaged transition where we have two systems, and instead shift into all electric systems. Like I said, we're just using the same formula, but putting it into electrification. And the way that this will kind of benefit us all, if we can go to the next slide, is rather than that $60,000 per customer to cover that pipe replacement, we're going to have a cheaper investment instead. So it costs on average about $16,300 to electrify a home in New York. That can be higher depending on if there's deferred maintenance needs, more weatherization and insulation, upgrades to wiring, et cetera. But even if it is twice that or 3 times that, compared to the high cost of gas pipeline replacement and repair, ratepayers are going to be coming out ahead, and we're going to be lowering the overall cost on the rate base. Next slide, please. So that's why we really see New York Heat as this big opportunity to protect families from spending billions on the gas system and allow us to free up those funds and redirect them into whole home electrification and thermal energy networks instead. So just a quick update on where we are in the legislative process. The New York State Senate and their one House budget proposal included the New York Heat Act. So we're so grateful for their leadership. And we really urge all of you to, reach out to your assembly member and encourage them to fight for this to be in the final budget, to really get at the structural issues that are keeping our bills high and keeping us hooked on gas when we know that it's poisoning our health and poisoning our climate. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. That was fantastic. So interesting to see, how we can make this transition possible at scale. Because I think part of the challenge is we lack the imagination, right? To even imagine that things could be so different and that we could transition not just house by house, but block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood. And the way that you spelled it out was just so clear and concise, and I'm sure people's wheels are turning, even if we don't have a ton of questions in the chat. Please share your thoughts, folks. Ask questions. Ellen, thank you again for posing one. Do you have a pre-written? Oh, and Lisa, of course, already responded, but do you have a pre-written script to share on my social media of what to say to our assembly members? Thank you so much for asking that. And Lisa put a little link to a message that everybody can fill out and send a message urging their assembly member to please support this bill. And we will also be going over other take actions And sorry, yes, please keep your questions coming for Allison. And then after Annie's presentation, we'll go over all the questions. But while it's still top of mind, the GAP, please share your questions about how we're going to transition and downsize the gas distribution system. And thank you so much for providing the details or the link to the one pager on New York Heat. That's great, Lisa. Everybody should save that. And it is in Renewable Heat Now's link tree if you ever don't have it handy. Okay, we're going to now hear from Annie Carforo, the Climate Justice Campaign Manager for We Act for Environmental Justice. Annie, thank you so much for being here, for all your great work advocating for this transition, and appreciate you sharing about how we can reduce energy burden in New York State.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Betta and New Yorkers for Clean Power, for hosting this. And hi, everybody. I'm going to be talking today about another explicit way that New York Heat can really help New Yorkers or protect New Yorkers from rising energy bills, which is language in the bill that would ensure no New Yorkers paying more than 6% of their income on their monthly utility bills. So we're going to talk a little bit about where this idea came from and what that could look like in New York State. Next slide. So for those that are not familiar with We Act, we are a 36-year-old community-based organization. We were founded up in West Harlem, advocating for fair environmental health and policy practices. We organize around nearly 800 members to get involved in our advocacy campaigns that are focused on climate justice, energy justice, and equitable and fair land use practices. So going back in time, we're going to talk about in 2016, the Public Service Commission, which is this body that regulates our utilities, they, through an energy affordability proceeding, they had adopted a policy that they set a goal for New York State that no New Yorker would pay more than 6% of their household income on energy. And this was really targeting the 2.3 million low-income households in the state, where people were paying upwards of, at times 15, 20, 25% of their monthly income on their energy bills. This was really exciting for advocates at the time, this type of affordability guarantee. And we were really excited to see that the state was putting, commitments on the books to address energy affordability. That proceeding also created the statewide energy affordability program that Laurie had spoke about earlier, which has been proven to be a really successful program in helping address really high energy burdens for households by providing this monthly discount on their electric or gas bills. So 2016 was a big year for energy affordability. There was a lot of potential, a lot of excitement. But if we go to the next slide, we can talk about what's happened since 2016, which is that we have seen very little movement in terms of accomplishing this goal that was set 9 years ago. And in fact, energy affordability crisis in New York has really only gotten worse. Right now, 1 in 4 households are still paying more than 6% of their income on energy bills. There was a study that looked at New York City and found that, again, some of the lowest income households are paying more than 25% of their monthly income on energy costs. That's, really untenable when we think about all of the other costs, costs of living that are included here in New York. We also are seeing that utility debt is on the rise. Laurie talked about this, and the impact that this has on all ratepayers when we have this type of debt. But we're seeing levels right now that are nearly the same as during the COVID-19 pandemic, when there was a really big economic disruption. But now it seems that people really can't keep up because the cost of energy continues to rise, which is why we are seeing utility debt at nearly $1.8 billion statewide. If we could go back, thank you. And despite good intentions, right, the energy affordability program, as we've mentioned, is a really great program in terms of helping people stay out of utility debt and being able to afford their bills. But there's still, challenges to getting the program out there and getting the people who need it most enrolled. So Right now, you still have to really manually enroll yourself for EAP. That's why Laurie refers a lot of people to the program, which means that if you're eligible, you might not, and you don't know about it, you're not receiving that discount. And right now, there are nearly 1.4 million households across the state that would be income eligible, but are not enrolled in the program. So what we're really seeing is that despite the promises that the Public Service Commission made back in 2016 in that energy affordability order, there has been no comprehensive action to really address energy affordability in a meaningful way. But instead, we have these growing problems, and we're perpetuating energy inequity through our rate structures and through, a lack of really targeted and directed programs helping households that need it the most. So next slide. So that's where the New York Heat Act steps in. The New York Heat Act it's very simple. We'll talk about what it does in terms of the 6% cap, but on its face, it's really helping to overcome a lack of political will in the Public Service Commission to accomplish this goal that they set back in 2016. So what the bill says is it requires the Public Service Commission to develop a plan within 1 year of the bill passing that outlines exactly how they want to achieve the 6% energy burden goal. And it does not dictate how they do this. It doesn't require the state to put money towards this goal. It doesn't require anything. It just says using all available tools. And we'll talk on the next slide a little bit about some of the available tools at their disposal. But as Laurie mentioned, there are lots of ways that we can tackle energy burden through bill discounts, rebates, energy efficiency programs, et cetera. So the New York Heat Act is the language in the bill is saying to the Public Service Commission, look at everything, rate design, et cetera, see how we can coordinate and target comprehensively households that are most burdened. So, I guess we could go into the next slide. What I would say is that there are a lot of different programs that already exist because New York does take this problem seriously and they are trying to address energy costs. But these programs are not right now talking to one another and they're not really targeting the people who need it the most. And there are these basic improvements we can make, as we mentioned, like making sure everybody who's eligible for the energy affordability program is enrolled. So what we wanted to, kind of display here is that there's more than one way to accomplish this goal, and there's funding that's coming from across the state, federal programs. There's different ways that we can tackle this. There's new also programs or services that are going to be coming online that can address energy affordability. There's lots of talk about a cap and invest program that can, provide potentially utility bill credits for folks. There's the new NYPA REACH credits that are coming out of Build Public Renewables that can help lower energy bills. And as Laurie was really mentioning in detail, there's a lot of different ways that we can look at rate design to make sure that everybody can afford to pay for their energy costs. So, what we're trying to show here is that accomplishing the 6% goal that was set back in 2016 is absolutely doable. We just need to create a plan. We need to be coordinated, and we need to make sure that no New Yorker is paying 20% of their income on energy bills, because energy is a human right. We need to be able to turn our lights on. We need to keep our homes cool in the summertime. We need to keep our homes heated in the wintertime. And everybody should be able to afford to do that. So New York Heat, again, it's kind of just that push to help get the state to really take this goal seriously, and direct some of the resources they're already putting towards this problem in a more productive way. I also want to flag and just give a shout out to energy efficiency, because that is one of the best ways to immediately lower a household's energy costs. But right now, our energy efficiency programs are not penetrating the market, especially low-income households, because there are a lot of barriers that low-income households face. So I want to give a shout out to another campaign very quickly that Renewable Heat Now is working on, which we could go to the next slide, which is the Green Affordable Pre-Electrification Fund. So there's a couple of people on this call that definitely know a lot about energy efficiency improvements in homes. And what we, at its most basic, if a contractor goes into a home to do some sort of energy efficiency or weatherization upgrades to make that home better insulated, and to save that household money on heating and cooling costs, if there is any prevalence of environmental hazards like lead or mold or asbestos, or there's structural barriers like foundation issues or water intrusion, or the roof needs to be replaced, contractors' hands are tied, and they basically have to walk away from that home, and we can't help that homeowner or that renter upgrade their home and make it better insulated to hold their heating or cooling. This is a major problem because a lot of these structural barriers do cost money, and not everybody can afford to make those upgrades to make their homes healthier and safer and ready to be weatherized, which really leaves them, no pun intended, out in the cold. So Renewable Heat Now has been pushing for this gap fund, which it does exactly what it sounds like. It fills these gaps in existing energy efficiency programs to make sure that nobody is being turned away because of the conditions of their homes. And instead, we are investing money to make sure that those homes are ready to be weatherized, insulated, and energy efficient. So the gap fund would work with existing programs like Empower Plus, like AMEP, like Climate Friendly Homes, and cover a host of different barriers that are currently unfunded. So this can include mitigation of environmental hazards. This can include replacing insulation. It can include septic and plumbing system repairs, roof or foundation or wall repairs, water intrusion mitigation, even electrical and wiring upgrades. So this is more funding we're putting towards making everybody's home safe and healthy and efficient, which can also lower costs. And the GAP Fund is a really important bill to make sure that we are getting over those barriers that are leaving low-income households out of existing programs. So we're really excited to be pushing for both New York Heating GAP Fund this year. The Senate did include language for the GAP Fund, which is exciting, and even the Assembly's One House budget nodded towards this issue of needing to address structural issues in homes to access weatherization and energy efficiency programming. So, we have a lot of hope that we can see something in the final budget that covers these types of issues to make sure that everybody is getting access to, energy efficiency programs to help lower their costs. So that is all I have, and I'm happy to answer questions or move on to the next steps.
Thanks, Annie. I think we'll do the take action and then we'll do questions. Lisa, are you able to provide the take action for folks?
I'm going to try. My Zoom keeps freezing. So could we go to the next slide, please, Lorenzo? I just want to recap for folks because there's a lot we talked about here. What's now at play now that the 3 budget proposals are out: the governor's budget proposal, the Assembly's budget proposal, and the Senate's budget proposal. The governor put this weird 200 million a year for 5 years with a laundry list of things that it might cover and not very much specificity in her budget announcement or budget proposal. We don't really know what her intention is there other than to put something in her budget as far as we can tell. I didn't even put that on this slide. But the Senate One House was very strong with a lot of the things we asked for. New York Heat Act is in there in full. The GAP Fund is in there in full. $50 million for heap cooling, like Laurie mentioned, the need for this in the summer. The Assembly One House put in $330 million for Empower Plus, which is a really important energy affordability and energy efficiency program for low and moderate income households. It currently is only funded by ratepayer money. It would be much more equitable and very helpful to have some budget money added to that. Budget money is a less regressive way of funding those programs, so it would be really good to add that. And then both the Assembly and Senate One Houses did one of the main things Laurie and PULP and many of us are advocating for, which is to put more money in that energy affordability program. And just as a reminder, it's like how uninsured people cost everybody a lot in the healthcare system because people are uninsured and they end up in the emergency room. EAP is kind of like that. People who aren't in EAP have all these arrears, and that costs all of ratepayers a huge amount of money. So it's not just helping people who need the help, which of course should be enough, but it's also really saving money for everybody. So that's where we're at in the budget, and these are the things that we want to fight for in this upcoming budget for energy affordability, um, which also has advantages of climate, health, and upgrading our homes. Okay. So let's do a take action. I've been sharing some links in the chat, and I just want to share the one-stop shop, which is the Renewable Heat Now link tree. And this link, which you can always find if you go to Renewable Heat Now's Instagram, it's in the bio at the top, or you could bookmark it, has the take action for the GAP fund. Oh, can we go to the next slide, please, Lorenzo? The take action for the New York Heat Act, and also the links to sign up for our grassroots meeting for advocacy on these bills, which is tomorrow night at 7 on Zoom. We have a great program that will go into the whole budget process and where we are at and the strategy to win these bills, especially New York Heat. And then so the sign up for that is in that Linktree link. And then also we would love for you to join us next week in Albany, where we're going to be having a big advocacy day for energy affordability and this in the budget. We have buses that are free that you can hop on. We're going to serve lunch to everybody. It's going to be a really fun and powerful day. The buses are going from Brooklyn, Manhattan. There's a Hudson Valley bus making 3 stops, one in Croton, one in Newburgh, and one in Kingston. And there's an upstate bus, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica. So help us fill those buses and make that day incredibly powerful. We had a wonderful advocacy day in February that I have to say people who came said it was the best day they've ever been in Albany. They had an amazing time. They felt really powerful and accomplished a lot. And we really have to keep pushing, especially the Assembly, on these priority bills. So the signups for those are all in the link tree, and I hope everyone could just take a moment, click on that link tree link, and go through, sign up for the Power Hour, send those emails to your legislators, and if you possibly can take the day, a week from today on Wednesday, and hop aboard one of those buses or join a carpool and join us in Albany. We would love to see you, and we guarantee it'll be worth your time. So with that, I am done. We're going to turn it over to Betta. Thanks everybody for joining us. For those who have to leave now, but for those who can stay, our presenters are going to be here till 1:30 to answer the rest of your questions.
Thanks so much, Lisa. And thank you for all of your incredible work organizing these days of action. The last one was magical and empowering, and we got so much good feedback. And a lot of that is thanks to you and the small team of organizers that make these mobilizations happen. So appreciate you and appreciate all of you for being here and for all of your great questions and thoughts that you've shared in the chat. As Lisa mentioned, we are going to be meeting again online tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock for our monthly Power Hour, gearing up for the rest of the session, and also for our in-person mobilization next Wednesday, which we would love to see many of you at. Bring your friends, family, neighbors, and sign up at the link tree that Lisa shared in the chat. So I did see a few questions. Oh, too bad. Piper left, I think. But she had one about thermal energy networks. Maybe we can follow up with Piper after. Also from Peter King. This was for Allison about the issues of depreciating leak-prone pipes. Is there a case for asking New York State to document these better, the leaks better? In Syracuse, he says, in Syracuse, we may be seeing climate impacts on all types of pipelines, water, gas. The New York State Climate Impact Report clearly IDs the possibility that these depreciating pipes are a climate impact and shares a link. But this impact may already be here. Documenting this as a climate impact may make a better case for New York Heat. Allison, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on LPPs and how we can kind of ID them better and document potential leakage.
Yeah, sure. And just clarifying, leak-prone pipes doesn't mean they're actually leaking, which, would be a safety hazard. And we're definitely like within New York Heat, we're not saying don't fix things that are a risk for people. Leak-prone pipes are pipes that are like nearing the end of their life and kind of need to be prioritized for replacement, repair, or decommissioning. So I think the overlap with New York Heat really is we're trying to get an option on the table for that actual decommissioning of leak prone pipe, where you have a section that's, kind of at the end of the network, rather than spending millions of dollars to go in and lay new pipe, which is typically how we approach leak prone pipe repair in New York, is they just put a new section in. Looking at that and saying, would it actually be more cost effective to decommission that pipe and instead upgrade everybody who's served by it and have their homes be all electric? And if it is more cost effective, it gives the Public Service Commission and the utilities the authority to do that without having some of the legal barriers in place that currently block them from really moving forward that kind of model. And there are some examples of where this is already happening. It's just hard to scale with the existing barriers in the law. So I can drop a link in the chat to an example from our G&E's service territory in Fairport, New York, where as part of their non-pipe alternative process, there was a section of leak-prone pipe, and they got every customer along that line to say, you know what? Yeah, we'll take the free appliance upgrades, we'll electrify, so you can decommission that pipe and save us all money. So New York Heat is sort of attempt to take that model of a non-pipe alternative to leak-prone pipe replacement and really move it at scale. And I can drop that link in the chat in a sec.
Thank you, Allison. We also had a question from Tom about asking, is the Cap and Invest program stalled in the governor's office? That was something that Annie mentioned would be, part of the suite of solutions to addressing energy burden and energy affordability crisis. With the Cap and Invest program, we would be able to raise billions of dollars a year that would some go towards climate mitigation, investing in clean energy solutions, electrification, and also potentially helping with utility bills. The program that is currently collecting dust on a shelf included a proposal to provide rebates for electric bill, utility bill customers. But unfortunately, the governor did pause the release of the regulations that were supposed to be coming out in January. And we're not happy about that. We want to continue to put pressure on Governor Hochul and her administration to release those regs and move forward with this process so that we can get the program in place to reduce emissions, reduce pollution, and invest in solutions. So I will put a link in the chat to yet another take action that you can fill out if you have a moment aimed at Governor Hochul so that we can move forward with that program. And there is also a new coalition that's formed called New Yorkers for Clean Air that we're a part of. And we're certainly welcoming new org members and people who are interested. So feel free to reach out if you want more information about that. Now let's see. I know there's a lot of great comments. Are there other questions in the chat both Peter and Chris Carrick raised the issue of health, which Annie, I don't know if you want to touch on that. I know that public health and, is very much tied to environmental justice and a big priority of We Act and yours. You didn't go into it too much in this presentation, but if you want to just share a little bit about how, public health is impacted in addition to some of these other issues related to energy affordability and climate, and how the GAP fund can help it with that.
Yeah, definitely. There's so many connections to our climate crisis and public health and moving away from fossil fuels. Buildings are our largest polluter statewide, and in New York City, where we act is located, 70% of our emissions come from our buildings. So moving our buildings off of fossil fuels has immediate public health benefits in terms of cleaner air that people are breathing, both outside of their homes, but also inside of their homes. There has been an growing body of research, including a project that WEAC did called Out of Gas and with Justice, that looks at the negative air quality impacts of having a gas stove in your home, especially if you're living in a smaller home or an apartment that maybe doesn't have a range hood because it's an older building. And we really should have never had gas stoves in our homes. They're incredibly toxic. As somebody who grew up with a gas stove in their home and always thought that it was the better option, I can firmly say that cooking on an induction stove or an all-electric stove is not only significantly better for your health, it's a better cooking experience. They're easier to clean. They have more control. They're safer. So there's a lot of, benefits in terms of your respiratory health of living in an all-electric home. And that's really what New York Heat is trying to do. But the GAP Fund as well. Nobody should be living in a home that has mold, that has lead paint, that has asbestos in it. This is, common knowledge, but it is a shame. It is shameful that in New York, people are forced to live with these types of environmental hazards simply because they don't have enough money to do the remediation work. And so there are, we haven't calculated this yet, but we're looking into how to do it. Quantifiable health benefits of a program like the GAP Fund, where we are making sure that people are not living in homes with toxic hazards that are making them sick. And lastly, I would just say having more thermal control over your home, being able to keep your home cool in the summertime and warm in the wintertime at an affordable cost has significant health impacts too, both mentally but also physically. Heat is the #1 weather-related killer in the country and the world. And so air conditioning, which was once seen as maybe a luxury in New York State, is really a necessary component that we need in our homes as our summers get a lot hotter. And so making sure that people can afford their energy bills is essential to health equity in the state. And so these two bills have, very significant impacts on both on people's health.
Thank you, Annie. And I know that Laurie also mentioned about the $150 million that ideally would go for a heap cooling benefit, right? Which we definitely want to support, and that's such an excellent point. And although the topic of today's teach-in is energy affordability, since we're on the subject of health and gas stoves, I will also give a little plug, since Annie alluded to all of the indoor air pollution from gas stoves, that there is another bill that we're supporting this session, the Healthy Homes Right to Know Act, which would require that all new gas stoves that are sold in New York State have a warning label, just like cigarettes, so that people know what they're getting into and maybe would pause and decide instead to get an induction stove if they're in the market for a new stove. So anyway, let's see. Oh, Jared has another question. When is the next Breathe Easy event where you educate people on in-home air quality? Well, Jared, I can tell you we're having one tomorrow, and I'm so glad that you brought that up. Let's see. Do we have the link handy to register is the other question. I can get that up. And actually, it's a good thing to mention to this group too, because we've been doing now several what we're calling Breathe Easy, cleaner air, lower energy bills workshops, and Annie's been one of our star presenters, which somehow we're going to have to do it without her tomorrow at Medgar Evers College in Brooklyn. We have a workshop at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning that we're doing with the Medgar Evers College community, but it is open to the public. So if other people are interested in joining us, we'd love to have you. And what we do basically is, and thank you, Lorenzo, for putting the link to register in the chat. We're going to do a similar presentation as Annie's been doing, focusing on the health harms from gas stoves, what people can do, to minimize the air pollution in their home. We'll raffle off a induction cooktop, which is a lot of fun. And then we also do a workshop utilizing these energy literacy conservation kits so people can learn how to reduce their energy use and save money, as well as having people on hand to help sign them up for the energy assistance program, other programs like community solar that can help reduce bills, as well as taking action for New York Heat, which I have this little flyer floating around here that we pass out and encourage everybody to take action and really let people know kind of the latest on how we can work together as a movement to transition our buildings off of fossil fuels and do it as affordably and equitably as possible. So would love to, bring these programs to your community. If anybody's interested in partnering with us, we would be delighted to help organize one in your community. And as Lisa put in the chat, in addition to the one that we have tomorrow in Brooklyn at Medgar Evers College, we also have one coming up on March 27th in Poughkeepsie that we partnered with for the Menion. I believe we're also going to have Spanish translation at that one. And we have a few more in the works across the state and would love to work with you on one. And Buffalo, there is an event also this Saturday in Buffalo. I don't think it's exactly a Breathe Easy workshop, but it is sort of a better homes and buildings event, which Lorenzo, if you have the chat and want to share that with any of our Buffalo friends, I'm sure that they would be hopefully interested. And we can also send a follow-up with all of these events. But do let us know if you're interested in hosting one that kind of ties together these, key issues on health, air pollution, energy affordability, and ultimately the transition off fossil fuels in buildings. And Jared said, perhaps you can host one here in Dumbo. Sure, I love Dumbo. I don't, Dumbo is not necessarily a neighborhood that comes to mind that's terribly energy burdened, but Dumbo's gotten very fancy in the past 20 years, but it is a very, happening place, and I'm sure there would be ways to engage residents there on these issues. So thank you for that idea. And we'd love to do something there, right in downtown Brooklyn on the water. Love it. Any other questions or take actions that we're forgetting before we wrap up here, guys? Thank you so much again for joining. Thank you to our presenters, Allison, Annie. As always, you're fantastic and appreciate all of the great work that you're bringing to this movement. It's really a pleasure to get to work with you and get to work with many of you across the state. Times are tough right now. It's very, very bleak, as we know at the federal level, but in these dark times, it's up to all of us to be the light and to keep carrying on. And I know that we can make progress. The last time Trump was in power, we passed the Climate Mobilization Act in New York City, Local Law 97. We passed the CLCPA in Albany. So we can do it again. We can make history by passing the New York Heat Act, by passing some of these other critical bills, and continue to forge ahead and build our movement and implement solutions on the ground and really support each other, right? Because part of how the fascists win is by people feeling isolated and divided and hopeless. And I think a big part of why we do these teach-ins is not only to empower people with more information and take action, but it's also to build community. So I feel very grateful for all of you and look forward to the next time we meet. Hopefully tomorrow night, many of you will be there, Renewable Heat Now, 7 o'clock. Be there or be square. And again, next week in person in Albany on the 19th. Would love to see you. So thank you so, so much. And we'll be in touch soon with the PowerPoint and more details on how you can, move forward with some of the issues and actions that we discussed today. So thanks, everybody. Be well.